Okay, this is the lecture for Ancient and Medieval History for Monday, the 21st of March, 2022. And you've just turned in and corrected Chapter 9, which is on the High Middle Ages. So you are well ahead of where we are. On the other hand, we only have a couple of more chapter surveys. So that's a good thing. Where we've left off in our lecture is the godlike emperor, starting with Diocletian, who becomes emperor in 285. Oh! There is a correction. Yes, there is a correction for a mistake that I made in my written notes as well as in my lecture notes. And I'm glad I caught it, although I'm sorry I didn't catch it before. When I talked about Maximinus Thraxus throttling Alexander Severus during the crisis, I consistently used the year AD 230. That's wrong. The year that he did that is AD 235. My bad. I misremembered it. And there's no excuse, because I should know these things, but obviously I messed that one up. So, cross out 230 and add 235 to that notation. My sincere, embarrassed apologies. I usually don't do that. Okay. So, we talked about Diocletian taking power and making a decision that the civil war is caused by a few things that can be solved. The first thing that can be solved is the idea of the emperor being solitary. When you have one emperor, that emperor is alone against the world. And the truth is, right now, Diocletian correctly calculates, the job is too big for any one man. You've got a frontier in Britain and in the Sahara Desert, which are low-grade threats, but they're still threats. You got high-grade threats on the Rhine frontier, the Danube frontiers, and the eastern frontier. One guy can't do it all. And one guy is critically weak at a time when nobody respects the imperial power. All they respect is force. Rome has devolved. Accepting that and coming up with a plan to deal with the devolution, Diocletian comes up with the Tetrarchy. The Tetrarchy is the rule of 4 emperors. 2 senior emperors, he and Maximian. 2 junior emperors, Galerius and Constantine Chlorus. And these 4 emperors are depicted in statues, clutching one another, looking fiercely into a scary, dark world, like somebody on the porch. A nighttime horror movie involving vampires looking for the next vampire, clutching one another and holding on to either the world or to their swords. The Tetrarchy is an answer. And Diocletian further systematizes it and moves it away from human error. What Diocletian says is that each emperor should have a 20-year term. So he and Maximian should resign at a certain point, about 20 years after 285, which is around the year 305. Now, nobody has ever come up with the idea of limited terms before. Nobody. But Diocletian thinks it's a sensible move. Because if the senior emperors resign after 20-year terms, and the junior emperors are able to take their places as senior emperors, Well, then it's a system. Actually, Diocletian becomes emperor in 284. What is it with me in dates on this thing? I know better. Can I check? 284. Okay. So he appoints Maximian in 285, and he, therefore, 20-year terms. So, Diocletian and Maximian are going to resign after 20 years, and 21, and the junior emperors are going to take over, but they're going to resign, and new junior emperors are going to be appointed when they become senior emperors. And the idea is that, Diocletian's idea, is that the Tetrarchy will become a self-perpetuating mechanism to keep the Roman Empire stable, to keep the imperium from constantly scattering and devolving into civil war, to strengthen the government against this problem of imperial succession. In fact, Diocletian is, and I will say this rarely, the only Roman emperor ever to come up with a solution to the problem of imperial succession. And that is the Tetrarchy. Senior emperors, then junior emperors ascend to become senior emperors and appoint 2 new junior emperors, and these eventually become senior emperors and 2 new junior emperors. And you would think that being a junior emperor, and then a senior emperor, and then retiring to a nice retirement would be enough for anyone. It's better for the country. It's better for the emperors. It's better for the frontiers. Because now we have 4 imperial field armies, not 1. And they all work in concert. So the defenses in the north and in the east are actually effective for a while. To the point where Diocletian can even attack against Persia. Diocletian also establishes the court of the godlike emperors, where through a series of prestidigitations tricks, which is the tricks of a stage magician, you come up with a court ritual that treats the emperor a bit like a god, called the Emperor Dominus, owner, God, Lord. And this will somehow prevent further civil war. It makes sense. But that's not all. Because Diocletian understands that without money, the empire can't last. You need money. For everything Diocletian wants to do, he needs money. So Diocletian sets up the world's first large-scale wage and price controls. The world's first, and you should write this down, the world's first large-scale wage and price controls. Now, some moron idiot, if we continue to have inflation, inevitably, a Democrat or a liberal Republican will try to do wage and price controls. If inflation is just rapidly eroding the buying power of the dollar, a person who believes that government can be a force for good will inevitably say, okay, now, the government says a loaf of white bread costs this. A loaf of wheat bread costs this. The hourly wage of a trucker should be this. The salary of a teacher should be this. The price of a building set of blueprints should be this. The price of an appendix operation, an appendectomy, should be this. The price of a steak, a T-bone, should be different than the price of a ribeye, and they should both be these. The government, not the market, is going to step in and determine wages and prices. Oh, yeah, that's going to work out fine. Wage and price controls. Well, in the short term, it does allow Roman imperial currency to come back, in the sense that the Diocletian also reforms the money and insists that there be a certain minimum amount of pure content in each coin. He can't go right back to full 100% gold and silver pieces, but he can insist that there be a certain amount and that amount be regulated by law and that we move slowly back towards pure currency. So what Diocletian is trying to do is stop an arterial wound, which, if you know anything about first aid, is the kind of wound that spurts across the room and hits the ceiling and the walls and you guys over there. It is because your arterial blood is the blood coming out of your heart. It's all nutrified and oxygenated, and it's at high pressure. Okay, it's supposed to be at high pressure. You get a puncture in an artery, and all that pressure is going to go out the hole, and you can bleed out within minutes and die. Arterial wounds are very serious. So the Roman situation economically, and every other way too, is very serious. So Diocletian, whether or not he believes it's a great long-term solution, establishes basically socialism, a totalitarian economic system that has the government telling you what you can charge for your products and services and what you are going to get paid for your labor. But that's not all. He raises taxes. I mean, immensely high, incredibly high taxes. So instead of the Augustan system of low taxes, peace and prosperity, Diocletian feels the need for the government to have much more money than it has ever had before. So people end up paying a significant portion of their income to the government in taxes. We're talking, in some cases, half of what they earn. In some cases, of very rich people, more than half of what they earn. This is not good. Because, like the wage and price controls, which I have to tell you one of the downsides of, raising taxes retards the growth of the economy. It may provide the government with a short-term windfall in terms of, ooh, we get lots of money for a few years, but the economy will die. You're taking too much. It's one of the ways cancer kills you. Cancer takes a lot of the life force that your body otherwise needs, takes a lot of the nutrition, and basically it leeches off parasitically, like a vampire, the life that the rest of your body needs. So even if the cancer wasn't killing you in other ways, the fact that more and more of your body's energy goes to feed the cancer is going to wither and kill you. Taxes are the same way. Taxes pay the government, but the government does not produce an iota of wealth. Individuals do. The government strains from the wealth that others produce to provide public services. Normally, in a healthy economy, there is a balance. You take enough taxes to provide the peace and prosperity, but not so many taxes that you retard economic growth by vampirically, parasitically sucking the rest of the economy's value into the government. And wage and price controls are not going to help either. So Diocletian increases taxes. What's the problem with wage and price controls? It's like these folks who say, yeah, $15 an hour minimum wage, it's only decent. Really? Really? $15 an hour. It means the same thing in liberal Kansas as it does in Manhattan or downtown LA? No, actually it doesn't. $15 an hour in liberal Kansas is a good almost middle-class wage. $15 an hour, yes, there is a town called Liberal Kansas. $15 an hour in Los Angeles or New York isn't enough to buy you anything that you need. Homeless people could earn $15 an hour and remain homeless if they weren't crazy. They are. So, what else is the problem with wage and price controls? Well, let's look at the product suppression that government has for things like alcohol when we have prohibition, and drugs, which we have today. The government and prostitution. And any other thing the government forbids people from doing, gambling in most places. So the government has controls that say, no, 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 during the 1919 to 1933 or 34, no, 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 you cannot produce alcohol for sale, you cannot buy alcohol for consumption. No. So people all stop drinking, right? Just like today, there are laws against using all kinds of drugs, which are bad for you, there's no question. Oh yeah, pot doesn't make you bad. It doesn't. Pot doesn't. It's not bad for you like cigarettes, man. Yeah, have you known anyone who smokes pot for a long period of their lives? They become idiots. You take a person whose intelligence is up here, put them on pot for 20 years. Hey, dude. I'm telling you, if I wanted to be an evil dictator and rule over a passive population, I would make marijuana legal, and I would encourage people to do it who were in the lower classes, because instead of revolting against me, yes.
The reason why drugs really fry your brain is because your brain's made up of a bunch of cells that don't go through mitosis and don't replicate, so they're just constantly in interphase. And once you smoke and kill them off by cutting off some of the nutrients getting there, they won't grow back, so you lose some vital brain.
It's true. The same thing's true with alcohol, by the way. You are killing brain cells. Now, I know this because the reason I don't have eyesight in my left eye is because an optic nerve that had that type of cell was cut partially through by a doctor when I was a little kid, and they don't grow back.
How was it cut by a doctor?
Because I was born cross-eyed, and the doctor was doing corrective surgery to replace that when I was about 8 or 9 months old. And it was only after the operation he said, "Oh, by the way, it's my mom. Your son's blind in his left eye, legally." Really? Gee, I wonder how that happened. Yes.
Okay, so can't marijuana also trigger psychosis, though?
Any number of things can trigger psychosis. Yeah. Look, okay, let's say for a moment that you smoked marijuana when you were a dumb-bottom teen, and that marijuana, being from an illegal source, was tainted with LSD, which does happen. So you think you're getting beer, basically the beer of the drug world, and instead you're getting a psychotropic drug. Well, let's say it affects you at the moment, maybe a little bit, but let's say it doesn't. That can actually become part of your fat. That little bit of LSD can stay in your body as unburned fat until at some point 30 years later you burn it. And without any warning, you're in la-la land because you've just burned a fat cell that is tainted by not a good thing. So in any event, there are reasons why people are not supposed to take drugs unless they're prescribed by a doctor. But of course, like with alcohol, people are going to buy what they're going to buy. It should be illegal to sell your body to make a living. But prostitution is not called the oldest profession for nothing. People have been doing this for a very, very long time. So, unfortunately, vice and crime are with us. They've always been part of human society, and they probably always will be. Yeah.
Is the price of alcohol controlled though?
Well, it's sold through state liquor stores, so it may be.
I think
it's kept artificially high in some senses because the state wants to get its share of profits.
I think because I think Washington they don't have the state
Look,
kind of stuff.
I went to high school in a town actually that had the highest liquor licenses per capita in the world. Okay, in Wallingford, Connecticut, they were called package stores, and they were all private. And, I'm talking liquor licenses for package stores, liquor stores, for bars, for restaurants. Really, for whatever reason, this suburban Connecticut town had the highest proportion at one time of liquor licenses per population in the world. What was your question?
So I was just wondering, because I thought that the state regulation.
Yeah, it depends. Idaho, I think it does. Yeah. In Maine, it did. They had anywhere you have state liquor stores, they do.
Yeah.
But another thing was that liquor stores they were considered essential industries. So during COVID, they didn't get shut down. They were allowed to function. What does that tell you about what the government was doing? Okay, if you're running a small convenience store, you may get shut down depending upon what you do. If you're a wallpaper hanger or a carpenter, but if you sell booze, yee, yeah. In any event, the problem with government regulating the economy is it never works because what always happens is a black market forms. A black market. Before Prohibition, the United States did not have an organized crime problem. There were some ghetto gangs in the Italian neighborhoods. The Itais had the Black Hand, which were basically mobsters, and other immigrant groups. The Irish had the Dead Rabbits. They were basically mobsters. But these immigrant gangs preyed upon their own people, and they were all local. What Prohibition does is it encourages criminals to network with one another so that you can get people smuggling in Canadian whiskey or Cuban rum into the United States, and you get banjo-playing backwoods hillbilly folk from the Appalachians to sell their moonshine. And people making bathtub gin. So suddenly, after, 14, 15 years of Prohibition, you end up with, no, it's 1930, let's see, 2032. Yeah, 32, Roosevelt wins, 33, Prohibition's gotten rid of. So it's 13 years. After 13 years of Prohibition, suddenly the United States has an organized crime problem. Because crime got organized to profit from the sale of booze. Without Prohibition, we might not have mafia problems.
Wasn't part of that too is that if you had beer, then you're allowed to have that. It's fine, but you can't buy any.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
people would have these big barrels, and they're like,
yeah, if it was left over, but you couldn't make more, not beyond a certain point. I mean, it got to the point where my wife's grandfather made grappa, which is an Italian liquor made sort of an Italian brandy, and based on grapes. And he had to be careful about who he gave it to, because if he gave it to the wrong person, he'd be ratted out to the feds. This isn't America. So anyway, the point is, when Diocletian sets up wage and price controls, the government gets its paperwork, but then the real economy still has a black market. And because it still has a black market, the government is encouraging crime. Okay, so Diocletian does all of these things, and he stabilizes the empire. He even sets up a conquest of Persia's armies, and comes back to a Roman triumph in the city of Rome, and is called Persicus for a while. But Diocletian also realizes that Christianity is the problem. So, like Decius, he is going to make it a top priority of the imperial government to crush Christianity. But this is not Decius, a short-lived old Roman senator, general emperor. This is Diocletian, the second most powerful emperor in all of Rome's history. A man who basically solves the problems of the crisis, at least temporarily. When he goes after Christianity, he goes after Christianity with a vengeance. And what that means is, it's serious. The worst persecution of Christians by any government in all of human history happens during the 21 years of Diocletian's rule. I'm not exaggerating. Diocletian's people infiltrated Christian communities with spies. They infiltrated Christian communities with agents provocateurs. Those are people who make the Christians do stupid things by being among them and then saying, yeah, let's burn the place. Yeah, let's start a riot. And then suddenly Christians do something stupid like burn the place or start a riot. And of course they're going to be caught and blamed because there are imperial spies among them. Diocletian uses torture on a huge scale against men, women, and children to find out who the Christian leaders are, where the holy books are, so the leaders can be arrested and the holy books can be burned. This is a man who believes in the government power, and he has expanded the government's power. And so he uses the government's power without any restraint against Christianity. And even under all this pressure, the Christian faith continues to grow. But it is amazingly dangerous. Thousands of martyrs are made, but tens of thousands of people recant their Christianity. Why? Because torture is scary. It is. And when all you have to do is say words that deny a forgiving God, maybe you can get away with it. I'm not trying to make light of it, but it is a horrible choice that a lot of Christians are brought to because they're blamed for all of the faults. Now, why does Diocletian need all this money and power? Here's why. Diocletian rebuilds the Roman military. Instead of the heart of the military, the reorganized military being foot soldiers, the legions, the heart of the military becomes 4 horse armies with infantry components. Each emperor has a field army composed of powerful horsemen and powerful foot soldiers and powerful engineers. Now, the horse soldiers are the best. They still don't have stirrups, but they can be sewn into their saddles and things like that. And they're not as heavily armed as the cataphracts, but they are more heavily armed than ever before. So heavily armed, heavily armored soldiers on horseback. Now, the foot soldiers of Rome by this point are not recognizable. If they're lucky, they've got a chainmail shirt, they've got a simple pot helmet, they've got a round wooden shield like barbarians do, and a spear, not a pilum, and a long sword, not a short sword. These Roman soldiers who are on foot are not capable of doing the old testudo tactics. They're not capable of doing what the old Roman Empire foot soldiers used to be able to do. These guys are smaller, they are weaker, they are less well disciplined, they are less well paid, they are less well motivated. So how does Diocletian protect the empire with 4 mobile armies and they've got thousands and thousands of miles of frontier? Well, here's what they do. They put everything valuable behind walls. Everything valuable gets put behind a wall. You've got a granary in the middle of the wilderness where you store grain. You fortify it. You set up a place for people to live and protect that granary. If you have a bunch of farmhouses in a valley, you fortify them in a small village. Everyone has to live in smaller quarters, but they're behind walls. You put everything behind walls. Why? Because you can resist the barbarian attack. Men my age and young men your age are capable of fighting against men in their prime if we're behind walls and they're out in the open. By being behind walls, you take the male population that's not really first-class soldier material and you make them competitive by giving them defensive fortifications to fight from. So everything, and I mean everything that's valuable in the entire Roman world is put behind walls. Also, Diocletian breaks up the bridges that used to connect the empire as part of the highway system, and he puts forts along the roads. You know, like we have, well, you may not recall, because you don't see many toll booths around here, but our highways used to have toll booths every so often that you'd have to go through and pay in order to use them. What Diocletian does is at geographical choke points throughout the interior of the empire, he fortifies the roads. So if you're legally a Roman on business, you can use the roads just like before. If you're a Roman army, you can use the roads just like before. But if you're a foreign enemy, you're not going to be able to use the bridge. You're not going to be able to use the highways. You're not going to be able to benefit like the Goths did when they raided Spain. But all of this is extremely expensive! And that's why he needs to control the money supply. That's why wage and price controls. That's why I reset up currency with a certain minimum amount of precious metals. That's why socialism in the form of government control of the economy and incredibly high taxes to pay for the military reforms that will keep the bad body from killing, destroying, overwhelming civilization. That's what Diocletian's fighting for. So, what can Diocletian do in the end? Well, in the end, he convinces Maximian, his partner, his senior Augustus, after 21 years of Diocletian's rule, 20 years of Maximian's rule, to resign. Maximian doesn't want to resign. Maximian does not trust the Tetrarchy to last. But he owes everything to Diocletian. So he resigns. Diocletian retires to the Illyrian coast, what is now the coast of Croatia, and grows stuff in his garden for the rest of his life. The junior emperors, Constantine, Chlorus, and Galerius, step forward, and then they don't appoint new junior emperors. They don't, wait, well, maybe they kind of do, but it's not with the same vigor Diocletian did. And Constantine Chlorus dies, and his son, Constantine, who will be called the Great, takes over for him, not the junior emperor. So suddenly, within 5 years, by 310, 311, the system of the Tetrarchy that Diocletian had set up as a mechanism to perpetuate peace and prosperity is gone. Because Galerius is hardcore persecuting the Christians in the East, and he's got a junior emperor that does whatever he's told. And Constantine Chlorus gives all of his power when he dies to his son, not to any junior emperor. And so now we have an emperor of the West and an emperor of the East that are getting ready to fight. Now look in the pictures. Lower left, under the Tetrarchy, you will see a bronze statue of what looks like a bug-faced, bug-eyed alien. Woo! That is Licinus. Licinus is the enemy and partner of Constantine the Great. Licinus rules Rome and the East, and Constantine rules the West, and they together fight and try to take over the empire one from another. And during a time of war, there's the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, which I've told you about. Constantine's approaching Rome from the north. There's the Milvian Bridge between Constantine and Rome. Just before the battle, sun ray hits him, and he hears from the heavens, "In hoc signo vinces," the voice of God saying, "In this sign conquer." And he sees a bright, shiny Chi Rho in the sky, the symbol of Christ, the monogram of Christ. The Chi Rho looks like this. It's better than that. Here, it's a P and an X. And so Constantine has all of his troops carve a Chi Rho into their helmets and their shields, and he wins. So he and Licinus promulgate the Treaty of Milan, or the Edict of Milan, which legalizes Christianity. For the first time, Christians are legal. You can be a Christian and not a criminal anywhere in the Roman world. Oh, wow. Oh, that's good. Galerius is gone. Licinus is here. But this is all from Constantine. Why? Because Constantine's mama, Helena, is a Christian. Yes, Constantine is the son of a practicing Christian. Is he a Christian? Not yet. But Christianity is legal. And then Constantine takes over from Licinus, beats him in the East, and becomes the only Roman emperor. So where we're going to take things next is the reign of Constantine the Great. Questions, comments, thoughts? Okay. Yes?
Why does Constantine look scared in his photo?
I will be talking about his statue tomorrow.
Sweet.
Trust me. No, I wouldn't have put it there. It's arresting looking. It really is. Bye.